From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. Here's what's ahead. We'll talk with K-State's Dan Flippo about in-crop robotic units for conducting various field operations and the exciting possibilities for this kind of autonomous technology. He's currently refining a unit that can scout standing crops for insect activity. Then one of the guest speakers at K-State's 2019 Swine Day last Thursday, the veterinary consultant for the Canadian Pork Council, Egan Brockhoff, will talk about the preventative actions Canada is taking to exclude African swine fever from that country. And K-State's Charlie Lee will be in to talk about new research on deer predators, including the impact of coyote predation on deer populations. All that here on Agriculture Today.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggled to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State research and extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
You're listening to the K-State Radio Network, and welcome once again to another Agriculture Today. Well, precision agricultural technology continues to unfurl, and it's always an interesting field to talk about what's next, potentially. And we have an individual from the Biological and Agricultural Engineering Department at K-State who is trying out some of the very latest technology in the field using robotics in crop to perform several tasks. And Dan Flippo is with us, Biological and Agricultural Engineer here at Kansas State University. We talk about autonomous agricultural technology, and these devices fit right into that heading, don't they, Dan?
They do. They're part of that. And so at K-State, we have a lot of robotic stuff going on, but kind of in the BAE department, we're the ground robotics. No one else is working on the ground robotics part.
This is very unique to K-State's program, then.
Yes, and so we have several different type of robots that we're working on, not only with crops, but also with water. We have some water vehicles. They're looking for blue-green algae, things like that. So we're trying to use the technology to really help the producer to get out there, maybe is to scout the field, or maybe to increase the arable land by putting up wheat on high-sloped hills where a tractor can't go. And so we're trying a lot of different things. You know, there's a lot of challenges, a lot of failure, but we are learning every step of the way.
Now, further describe the technology we're talking about, the robotics. You have, in some cases anyway, repurposed electric wheelchairs. Is that correct?
I have. I was given about 50 wheelchairs from an individual in Norman, Oklahoma, and they were from a company that made wheelchairs, and they were terrible wheelchairs. They weighed over 600 pounds. You couldn't take them inside, but they have track assemblies, and they're very well made. And so what I've done is I've taken these and I've stripped out all the old technology. I've kept the robust frame and things like that, and we've put new technology in there, and they make outstanding farming prototypes for robotics. And so we've added the latest technology in there and some controls and some new things with batteries and battery replacement and battery charging. And so we're coming a long way. But like I said, there's a lot of challenges to overcome, and we're doing well.
Well, how these work, they are considered rovers within the crop field, in between rows, carrying out various purposes?
Right. So all my robotics right now can fit between a corn row. So there's different categories. So scout rovers can go between. They're small, kind of a microwave size. They go out and they scout your field. So the producer doesn't have to walk around looking for pest pressure or stress, weeds, things like that. These guys can go out and then cover the ground and report back what they find. Now the next step is kind of where the wheelchairs come in. They can do work. They can plant. They can do a little harvesting. They can spray. But they're still small enough to fit in that size, and they're still small enough to be safe. They won't hurt you if they run over you. And they can be transportable very easily. So something nice about these small automation that we have is they're easily transportable. They can go on a trailer. They don't run the roads. They don't compact the soil. We can get lots of them out there. Maybe we're hoping that it would increase the season window for planting, harvesting, whatever. And also we can use electricity. There's possibilities for charging, solar panels, things like that. And so one thing we're trying to do is, historically, agriculture and the environment have kind of been at odds, especially lately. There's been some territorial things, and we're just getting so many people on this planet that we're having to rethink some things. What's the priority? Is it feeding the world or is it saving the world? And they're both priorities, and we have to make them both work. And so we're trying to use automation, these small robotics, to kind of have agriculture and environmental work together, and to really not only feed the world in 2050, but 2051, 2052, and keep feeding the world. And we can only do that if we take care of our soil, take care of our resources, our fossil fuels, things like that. I'm not a big environmental guy, but I really see the benefits of these, and I think we're not here to take over tractors. We're not here to kick out tractors. Tractors will always be around, I think, at least while I'm alive. But these small robots can augment the machinery side of food production so that maybe we can really do well in feeding the world by 2050.
One example that illustrates just what you're saying, Dan, you're trying to sync up the scouting function with an actual sprayer function that is applying infield in canopy to control, say, a spot insect problem, right?
That's right. We have an exciting grant that we got. Dr. Shard is the one leading that grant, student NIFA. It's called a National Robotics Initiative. And so the little history behind that, the U.S. government wanted to catch back up with robotics, and so they started this NRI proposal project. And so we've gotten two of the last three we've proposed. And that one specifically is interesting because we have scout vehicles or even small spray vehicles can go out, and using machine learning, we're attempting to spot aphids. And we've focused on sorghum because of the sugarcane aphid problem. And by an image, the computer is taught what an aphid is and what it's not. And so we have some entomologists really working with us, some computer scientists working with us. And the beauty behind that is that if we find those aphids, say in a small spot in the field, then we just spray that small spot. And we save chemical, we save time. Right now, a lot of people know you get an entomologist out there, they cover 2 or 3 spots in the field, and they make a judgment call. Either spray the whole thing or wait. You may lose some yield. But we're really trying to do it in a small site-specific way and spray just where the aphids are. And
the ultimate in precision, then,
yes,
really.
Yes.
And that's in the works. You haven't perfected the system yet. Correct?
No, we just started that last year. We have another grant through NRI. As I talked about earlier, we're planting wheat on high-sloped hills where tractors can't go. And so this could really open up some arable land. One thing we're also looking at is the battery technology and how to replace batteries on these vehicles so they don't have to come back a long distance, so you replace the batteries then. But we're looking into using UAVs or unmanned aerial vehicles to slide the batteries in and out, which is going to be quite a challenge to do, but it's a fun challenge. It's worthwhile.
One of the things that's out there that may come to fruition, and if it does, it will be tremendous, in that these units potentially could be fabricated in such a way that they can multitask. They can swap out functions. In other words, a producer could have one unit conducting a whole variety of field operations.
That's right. And one thing that's nice about these, they're small. They're going to be cheap. Right now, I don't have costs for everything, but it's going to be a lot cheaper than a tractor. But you're going to have a bunch of them covering a field. You remember the old scrubbing bubbles commercials where you have all these bubbles going after a tub? Well, you have all these vehicles out there kind of teamworking everything and getting stuff done. So we're excited about that.
And, in fact, 24 hours a day, if that's the inclination, that gets into a labor savings then.
It does. And part of it is, you're going to have some robotics skill that's going to be needed, some tech people that's going to be needed in this, but I do see it's coming.
So what is the next big step in K-State's project?
Well, we're working on several different things. We're working on a new class of robots to carry the sprayer, so it's going to be a little faster. It can hold a little more, up to about 300 pounds, and We're also working on refining our planting system, because one thing we found with these small robots is that we don't have the downforce to get those discs in the ground. And so we've tried. I mean, we've done all sorts of different things. So right now we're focusing on a tiller system where it actually has a powered wheel that digs the furrow. And so we're refining that. It's getting better every day.
And, of course, how much these systems will cost is a big thing. But it sounds like if they are refined to the ultimate point here, that the returns to their operation in the way of efficiencies and so forth could well mitigate whatever those costs might be. At least that's the aim.
Right. What I would like to see is kind of a drone rating, where every drone or every robot kind of has a number, and that's how many of those you need per 10 acres or so. I'm just coming up with that. But that's going to be a lot of variables, how efficient it is, what's the duty cycle between charges or fuel ups, how fast is it, and what does it do to the planting window and things like that. So there's a lot going in there. My friend Terry Griffin, who is an ag economist, he's going to have to get busy with that, but we're excited. I think we're doing good work, and I think it's needed work.
It's no longer pie in the sky.
Right.
These are realistic opportunities.
We're at an interesting point in history where we have the technology to do this, and we also have the need to do this. And there's a lot of startups starting up especially with these small ag vehicles. A lot of startup companies doing that very thing because people see that, hey, this is a great application for small robotic vehicles. I've heard of some other big companies that are doing the same thing.
It's coming on fast. It is exciting. The advent of in-field robotic systems to perform an array of tasks in the field as these things mature and as we get results from K-State's field trials as they develop these systems and test them out. And in that respect, Dan, the best of luck to you and your team in doing just that. We appreciate the update right here. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
That is Dan Flippo. He's a biological and agricultural engineer here at Kansas State University. You're listening to Agriculture Today. We'll be back after this over the K-State Radio Network. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. Agriculture Today continues now here on the K-State Radio Network, the Animal Sciences and Industry Department at K-State, and more directly, the Swine Research Team here at the university. Welcomed well over 300 hog producers and allied industry people to the 52nd K-State Swine Day on the campus last Thursday, and in keeping with a long-standing trend, it was another exceptional program and turnout. K-State researchers provided a comprehensive update on swine nutrition, reproduction, and health research discoveries by the university's program. Another session addressed nutritional programs in an integrated hog production system, but the day concluded with a discussion of what has become an inescapable topic that has riveted the swine industry's attention, that being the threat of African swine fever, which, as you know, has devastated the hog industry in China and is wreaking havoc in other Asian countries and elsewhere. Brought in to share what the hog industry in Canada is doing to prevent an incursion of AFS virus in that country, the president and practicing veterinarian with Prairie Swine Health Services out of Alberta and Manitoba, Canada, who is also on the faculty at a major Canadian university school of veterinary medicine. Dr. Egan Brockhoff is good enough to share some time with us right here discussing this ultra-important subject. Egan, thanks for sparing a few moments here. Good to have you at K-State. Fill us in a little more on your background, if you would.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. So, swine veterinarian is my core focus, but with that, I am the veterinary counselor for the Canadian Pork Council. And so I offer my services to the Canadian pork sector with respect to disease prevention, and of course biosecurity and all those good things that go along with being a veterinarian, as well as also doing some teaching with swine disease and medicine at the University of Calgary. So it's been an exciting year and a half, and lots going on.
And foremost among what's going on, African swine fever. Your perception on its threat not only to other places in the world, but to Canada, to the U.S., to the North American continent.
Yeah, without question, this is a real threat. This virus continues to expand globally. I just returned from another 10-day trip to China. The virus continues to circulate aggressively within China and move throughout Southeast Asia. And as that virus continues to spread from country to country, our risk just continues to grow.
And in that, there have been all sorts of discussions in as far as how to exclude African swine fever from a given area, in this case the U.S. or Canada. What has captured your attention there amongst all of that dialogue as the potential answer to this?
Well, what's really resonated with me is how industry and government have come together. Industry and government have recognized that ASF is a real threat. There is a real possibility that it could come to North America. And we have to be prepared for that. This isn't something we can ignore as this virus continues to spread. And so, what I am seeing and what makes me probably the most happy is that level of industry-government cooperation where both parties are coming together and saying, hey, we don't want this virus to come onto our shores. Let's work together. Let's work cooperatively. Let's make sure we keep this virus out.
Lending more specifics there, and you talked about what the Canadian industry is doing in response at Swine Day. What tactics is the Canadian hog sector embracing, biosecurity and otherwise?
Yeah, so the Canadian hog sector came up with a national biosecurity platform a number of years ago, working through PRRS virus, and we have taken that now with lessons learned from PED virus and our experiences with moving PED virus to a state where it's almost eradicated again from the country, and saying, okay, what do we need to implement to keep ASF out? What are the farm level things we need to do? What are the lessons learned? Transports, trucks, people working on the farms, and of course, most recently, the discussion around feed ingredients and that risk pathway, because so many of our countries import feed ingredients from around the world and from countries that have foreign animal disease.
Well, there are multiple risk pathways there, so is the industry better served concentrating on one or two, or do all of those have to be covered?
Well, I'm afraid they all have to be covered. Biosecurity isn't something that you can just do spot checks on and look at once a day. It's something that has to happen 365 days of the year. It has to be in the hearts and minds of everyone going into those barns. It has to be in the hearts and minds of people working in the feed sector, people working in processing, people working in marketing and distribution. We all have to be thinking about how we can minimize the potential risk of bringing a virus onto a farm.
And as you speak with producers, what are the direct things you're sharing with them as far as their part in doing that very thing?
Yeah, so having solid conversations with producers about sourcing feed ingredients from low-risk countries, if they have no other choice but to purchase a feed ingredient, then to look at storing it at time and temperature. So we have this 20 degrees Celsius for 20 days in Canada to try to reduce viral load. Really trying to dig in and talk to producers about the food that enters the farms. So the staff, the barn workers, what they're bringing into those barns every day. Potentially looking at no pork policies for the lunchroom, but definitely having conversations with them, everybody, about how they source products.
And you mentioned that the industries in the U.S. and Canada have had experiences with such as PRRS, such as PEDV. Has this given our sectors a bit of a leg up on this potential threat?
Well, certainly the efforts that we have been taking over the last decade or so to enhance our biosecurity around preventing PRRS, around working with PED virus and preventing PED virus, that has built up our biosecurity arsenal, if you will. But there's no question that we still have opportunity. We're not at perfect yet. We have opportunity to continue to move the bar up.
What worries you most, though, Egan, about what needs to happen that really isn't coming together yet?
Well, this is a big global problem, and it worries me that we're taking bites out of it every day. And I'm happy we're taking bites out of it every day, but there's still a lot to do. There's still work to be done with understanding how we can implement response and recovery, how we can ensure business continuity for farms and farm families in the event that a virus does come to our shores.
And there is a fair amount of robust research going on. In the exclusion category and other categories, maybe a vaccine at some point will come forth, some sort of treatment would come forth. So those initiatives might bear fruit, but we can't wait too long for that.
Yeah, no. We need to be prepared today. Safe, effective vaccines are probably still years away. Other measures, other antiviral measures are probably still years away. The virus is here today in the world. We have to be working on preparedness and prevention.
The U.S. and Canada, are there collaborative efforts going on between the two countries, the two industries? Because if it shows up in one, it's a threat immediately to the other. Yeah,
our agriculture sectors in North America are integrated in a very complete way. We're brothers and sisters. We're brothers and brothers. We're sisters and sisters. So what I've seen with ASF is governments coming together. And so I've seen the Canada-U.S. government working together cooperatively to ensure their diagnostics are in harmony, to ensure their responses are in harmony. Canada and the U.S. have signed zoning agreements to ensure business continuity as best we can in North America. I've also seen industry working with, so the Canadian pork sector working with the U.S. pork sector, because we're all in this together. And so that level of cooperation and collaboration has been great to see. The research working group, for example, the Swine Health Information Center group is on the Canadian Research Working Group. So Canadian researchers aren't doing redundant research that's happening here in Kansas or other locations.
It really is all hands on deck. Can it be kept out? It's the $10,000 question.
Well, absolutely it can be kept out. It's going to be hard work. There's going to have to be a ton of attention to detail. Maybe some things are going to have to change. Some attitudes will have to change, or some processes are going to have to change. But we can win this, and we have to believe we can. We have to push forward and continue to protect our farms as best we can.
Egan, we appreciate the input right here, as well as your presentation at Swine Day at K-State. Many thanks.
Yeah, thank you for having me down at K-State. It's been great.
Egan Brockhoff. He is the president of Prairie Swine Health Services out of Red Deer, Alberta, and Steinbach, Manitoba. He also teaches swine medicine at the University of Calgary. Once more, he lent information on what the Canadian swine industry is doing in response to and in defense against the threat of African swine fever. That at the 2019 Swine Day, hosted by the Animal Sciences and Industry Department at Kansas State University this past Thursday. You are tuned in to Agriculture Today. We'll stand aside now for a few moments. When we come back, we'll have today's agricultural news headlines. Also standing by with his weekly input for you dairy producers, K-State's Mike Brook with milk lines, and K-State wildlife specialist Charlie Lee also awaits for our weekly conversation. All of that straight ahead here on the K-State Radio Network.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128 plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local Extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Broadcasting from the campus of Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. And next up, today's agricultural news headlines, courtesy in part of DTN. Well, the state of the Kansas winter wheat crop declined once again this past week, according to the weekly report from the USDA. For the week ending on Sunday, our topsoil moisture supplies in the state at 1% surplus, 51% adequate, but 48% short to very short, relating to, again, the condition of the wheat crop there. Subsoil moisture at 2% surplus, 59% adequate, and 39% short to very short now. Winter wheat condition down to 44% good to excellent this week, 39% fair, and 17% at poor to very poor. Winter wheat emergence at 89%. That's very close to the average. The corn harvest officially complete in Kansas, according to the USDA. Soybean harvest 95% done. The grain sorghum harvest is 97% in, and the cotton harvest in Kansas 64% complete. Nationwide, the corn harvest reaching 84% complete as of Sunday. That's still 12% behind the 5-year average of 96%. Soybean harvest nationally at 94% complete. The winter wheat crop emergence nationally at 87%. The condition holding steady at 52% good to excellent. That was slightly below last year's good to excellent rating nationally at this same time of 55% then. And the grain sorghum harvest at 97% complete. Cotton harvest nationally is 78% complete. The USDA's new agricultural trade forecast shows better than expected export sales prospects, even more export sales to China, even without a new trade deal. Here's more from the USDA's Gary Crawford.
If you are a farmer looking for something to be thankful for, maybe Monday's new USDA export forecast might help a little bit, with prospects for fiscal 2020 looking a little bit better. We ended fiscal year 2019 racking up $135.5 billion worth of ag export sales, $11 billion less than 2018. But in August, USDA put 2020 exports at $137, but in USDA's new forecast,
we raised that slightly by about $2 billion to $139.
USDA's chief economist Rob Johansson, once again, China, the key factor here in the higher export forecast.
The forecast for exports to China is higher by $3.5 billion compared to our estimates in August, and is now expected to reach nearly $11 billion.
About $1 billion more than this past fiscal year, more than making up for some expected slower sales to Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Philippines, and the EU.
We've seen China is going to need more pork in particular exports, but also they're going to need to also import more soybeans from the United States for a number of reasons, one of which is that they weren't as able to import as much from South America as we expected, but also because they're going to be building out their livestock sector after the impact of African swine fever.
But he's quick to point out that even though
there is some optimism out there on a potential deal,
this better forecast for sales to China, not based on that, not based on an end to tariffs, but rather just on things as they were when the forecast was made. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
Next up, our weekly segment for you dairy producers out of the Animal Sciences and Industry Department here at K-State. Milk Lines, standing by, is K-State dairy specialist Mike Brook. Mike?
Today I'd like to talk to the Kansas dairy farmers concerning a bright spot as we look forward into 2020. You know, it's been kind of a tough year in 2019. We've had a lot of rain in many areas, made planting of the spring crop difficult and harvest of forage crops difficult this fall, and even during the summer as we tried to get out some of our hay crops and winter annual forage crops. However, as we look at prices, there has been a steady increase over the year. In fact, as we reach the end of August, for the first time, the dairy margin rose above $9.50. Previous months in 2019 had been below that. So for those that had purchased the insurance at the maximum level, they had been getting fairly nice sums of money each month as a result of the insurance program. However, that all ended in August, which was a good sign for the dairy industry, indicating that we had finally seen milk prices climb, in fact, to levels that we haven't seen in the last 5 years. It's been the end of 2014 since we've seen milk prices at the level that they currently are at. It's the result of several different things. One, the cow herd has shrunk a little bit here in the U.S. during the year. We've had fairly stable to slight increase in the growth of milk production in the United States. Normal increases in production per cow have been the result of that. And we've had modest feed costs, and it's been fairly stable. That has allowed the margin to rise to the level that has risen for now. So now, what do we have to look forward as we move toward the end of 2019 and into 2020? Well, it is forecast now that the all-milk price for 2018 will be $18.40 a hundredweight, and there are some predictions that for 2020, that number will be $18.80 per hundredweight, and some reports more recently that we may reach an average of $19.20 in 2020. So that's really good news for us as dairy farmers. So what's going to happen on the feed side of the equation? Well, if you look at what's being predicted for the average milk margin, it's predicted to average in 2020 of $10.10, which will be above the maximum insurance rate of $9.50 a hundredweight. So if you haven't purchased your dairy margin coverage, you might want to think about that. However, as you look at your options, very likely there will not be any collections in 2020 unless you purchase at the highest coverage rate. And even then, according to the averages that are being projected at the present time, there may be limited chance to even collect at that rate. However, over the years, that particular rate is probably paid out more consistently than other protection that we could purchase. So, as we look forward to 2020 as dairy producers, looks like it should be a fairly strong year for milk price compared to what we've been through, say, the last 5 years. However, we'll still have to mind our P's and Q's, making sure that our herds are productive and that we keep in mind that management is still very important if we're going to have the opportunity to collect on these higher milk prices. This is Mike Brook with K-State Research and Extension.
All right, Mike, many thanks. For those of you constantly on the go, and who isn't, our podcast service is well worth looking into. agtoday.net. That's agtoday.net. This is Agriculture Today.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Agriculture Today is back now, and we visit once more about wildlife management with Charlie Lee, wildlife specialist, K-State Research and Extension. Charlie, new research you'll cover today on coyote predation on deer, a long-standing topic, and there has been quite a bit of study in this area in the past, hasn't there?
Yes, predation has been considered the dominant source of mortality for white-tailed deer, particularly white-tailed deer that are less than 6 months of age throughout North America. There are occasions when other human-related causes can sometimes be the leading mortality source, even though predators are found in that area. But most research would state that juvenile deer survival is primarily governed by predation. And typically, most locations where we have white-tailed deer, we're dealing with 2 predator species, coyotes and bobcats. But in those locales where we have 3 predator species, that may include either black bears or wolves. And in some places, there would be all of those found in one location. Coyotes are a generalist predator, and they are going to exploit food resources to meet their dietary needs wherever they're found. And deer fawns are optimal prey for coyotes, especially when fawn mobility is somewhat limited. Bobcats are different. They're more obligate predators, and they typically specialize on certain prey types depending upon the location of the U.S. where they're found. bobcats may be the predominant source of white-tailed deer fawn mortality in some areas, but it's usually less than what coyote predation is if both species are found in the same area. So a recent research that was published in the Journal of Wildlife Management looked at predation rates and predator densities and white-tailed deer fawn survival in the presence of black bears, coyotes, wolves, and bobcats.
This study wanted to look at if there's a cumulative effect of predation when you have multiple species working on deer, so to speak?
Yes, that was one of the objectives, to see if predation rates are additive in those locations where additional predator species are found. The study was done in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, where the black bear, coyote, bobcat, and the wolves are present. In this particular study, they looked at several locations, summarized the deer density of fawns at 333 fawns per 250 acres, which is about one fawn per acre. The black bear density was about one black bear for 10 acres. The coyote density was similar at one coyote for 10 acres. Bobcats was much less than that, only at 3 bobcats for the 250 acres, which was very similar to the wolf density. So that gives you an idea. There were a lot of predators present, and certainly a high density of fawns in the areas where the study had occurred. Then they looked at the known fate of those 100 fawns that had been captured and fitted with radio transmitters and tried to determine mortality causes.
Simply by tracking fawns and then identifying somehow the predators that preyed on those fawns?
Well, they put implant transmitters in does, and then when the fawns were born, they very quickly found the fawns and fitted them with collars and then followed them for up to 3 years. So looking at the fate of those 100 fawns, they found that bears were directly responsible for mortalities in 11. Coyotes also were a mortality cause in 11. Bobcats were responsible for 6 fawn deaths. Wolves was 4. There were unidentified predation for 13, and then some of the more non-predation related causes would include things like abandonment, unknown trauma events, weak fawn syndrome, vehicle collisions, but all told, the fawn survival rate was about 36%. So their results indicated that the more predator species in the system is not entirely additive on its effect on fawn survival.
Now, there was another study, you say, that looked directly at coyotes and their impact. This drew from historical data on coyote predation on deer.
Yes, the most recent Journal of Wildlife Management had a group of researchers that assembled an 87-year data set from the eastern states, as widespread as from New York to Florida, to ask the question whether coyotes can affect white-tailed deer populations at large spatial scales in the east. And their conclusion was that coyotes are not controlling deer populations at a large spatial scale in eastern North America. Consider that eastern North America has not had occupation by coyotes in historic times. Some of those states have had coyotes less than 30 years. And consequently, that's a species of predators that their white-tailed deer have not dealt with, nor have the landowners or deer managers, and they're lacking some information. The original study that coyotes are not controlling deer populations at a large spatial scale in eastern North America was kind of opposite of some additional information that had been presented, and it generated a rebuttal. And that rebuttal questioned some of the information that was used in the study and stirred up quite a storm amongst wildlifers on a very simple topic, which would be predation and white-tailed deer survival.
How does all of this figure into deer management and hunting harvest as part of that?
Well, part of it is how you interpret some of the data results, and we're looking at older data sets how you interpret some of the data sets that may not be collected in the same manner. And I think one quote was that although it's true that coyotes, strictly speaking, are not controlling deer populations, it's important for wildlife managers to consider that coyotes, nevertheless, have influenced significant changes in harvest planning and hunter opportunity.
Interesting information that's been gathered recently on coyotes and their predation practices, how those affect deer populations and especially young fawns. Charlie, thanks for the overview. Charlie Lee, wildlife specialist, K-State Research and Extension. That caps off our Tuesday edition. Thanks for listening, and please rejoin us right here this same time tomorrow. Until then, Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network.